So picking up on something that Veronica was saying, but this is the whole thing there was proving this thing could work in a low-risk way. And Carlos, maybe that seems to be a critical thing around demonstration of these technologies and demonstrating of the potential of what could be done there. Any comments on how you see this different in different countries, how they provide the ability to demonstrate these technologies as a service for companies when you don't have a Veronica and some students to work for free for 6 weeks?
Yeah, okay. Yes, I think, well, that's a great point actually, because what perhaps they're information failures, that's what the economics call it, which means I don't understand the technology, or I don't understand whether it will work in my productive environment, in my company, and also I need to see it, to feel it in a company like mine, in my sector. So yes, I think you will find in different countries, they have completely different tools and facilities and people available to companies to address these information barriers. So now demonstration means not only projects. It could mean, for example, you have the French, the Germans, and Japanese have a database of their companies and how they're using digital technologies. So you go and it's actually, they did it together, and if you go and you'll see by their map and how they're applying it. So this is just purely information. It's a database to address this information failure. And then you'll have a lot of facilities in public research centers where actually people can go and see these things. So it is actually seeing the technology. That's another type of demonstration. And then there are projects like Veronica's very great and difficult project, in which then people actually engage in participating and then see it by themselves in their companies. So you'll see that they have different approaches to do this, but I think it's quite important that we separate, or we actually distinguish the importance of different types of demonstrations, whether it's information, kit, people, projects.
It's really interesting. So I guess in the context of what you were describing, Nicky, as well, that particular example of Domino is a great one, but and the Caterpillar example is great as well. And a similar characteristic, they're both very large organisations with a ton of resource, and yes, I fully understand the nature of the project you're working on, Veronica, as well. But any comments you wanted to make, Nicky, on this issue of how do you do this when you may have very few resources available?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because it depends how you do it. I mean, you can obviously acquire resource. It may be very difficult if you're in the wrong area. I would say maybe the first step is trying to link to your local university and see what is available there. Then you can potentially try to acquire or retrain the existing resource if possible. I don't know what will be easier. It will be depending very much on the circumstances and what the company wants to do and what sort of the initiative is, I suppose. But try to open up. I would say if you really want to transform and go digital, try to be open to all the opportunities, from local universities, local other companies that maybe have done it, that maybe are not in a competitive area that can assist.
So that's quite a nice one. So the idea of finding other companies that act as demonstrators, you can see a good practice example there. And I guess maybe just before we do open it up, Veronica, one for you about, you mentioned this issue of the suppliers could see the benefit of this. But were there any issues? And I guess this comes across this issue of demonstrating things and seeing how companies draw on external resources. But it's difficult enough for one company to change. If they've got to try and convince other organisations to change in order to make it work, it gets even harder, right? Any comment on that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yes, it's very hard. It's very hard. But I think that one thing that helps us is that the fact that companies are more aware that if you don't embrace the change now, you are going to be obsolete. So even though that there is no budget for your company for doing that, the intrinsic value of people is go and try to see how I can connect, how I can play in this game. And this is what the customers, the suppliers, they were trying to learn how I can do it. Once that they have this mindset that let's try it, we are in good grounds. Because we prove it that with the prototype, we put a couple of customers to play with it, and they love it. and they love it. And they went back and just feedback their people. So I think that is a question to put something that they can touch, they can break, and they can explore, to have this feeling of what will be the value for you. Once that they see that value, it's easier to go and start the transformation behind your company. I hope that I...
Yeah, no, that's a very, yeah, absolutely. So they also have the opportunity to have a what did you say? To fiddle with it and try and break it as well.
Yeah.
It's a lovely example, yes.
Yeah, it was, thank you for that question, thank you. Because it come back that it was key for us to identify that particular problem. And we wanted to hit a different, well, with one shot, hit different birds here. The first one is we wanted to have an idea of how the digital technology will behave in a particular problem. Secondly, we wanted to know that that problem is linked to external environment, to the customer. And we are coming here, Nicky was showing that you have to, in order to make it a business case, and we wanted to show it to the board that this is important to be implemented, we needed to really see what is the effect of this problem and how it can affect not just my operations, but how can it affect the customer. So we deliberately, we came to, I think that this was around 20 different problems that we had, but we stratified the problem into, first of all, it is possible to do it and to target that problem. Secondly, that it has impact to see what is the effect on the business and what is the effect in the external that is linked to our strategy at the same time. And finally, it's very important to see what drives you. For this company, they wanted to test the technology, but they also wanted to see if it's possible to have it at low cost, low entry barriers. So these are things that you have to think from more perspective. Now I am running it with another 4 companies. And these are the things that if you are going to invest, pick up your bird well before you try to kill it.
You're right. I mean, it is about low cost. I think there's a lot of barriers. They think it's going to be very, very expensive. But the return on investment, when you put these type of new technologies into these businesses, you can actually see it very, very, very quickly.
No, great stuff. Thank you. Thank you very much. There's another question over here somewhere, or did I? Oh, sorry, over there. Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, we have in the study the list of limitations in the data. You're right. You will have, as I mentioned, depends really on what you're comparing. The project initially, the ask was really give us one number, and precisely what we didn't do is to give one number to the client. Because precisely what you mentioned, the variability in the data, and what we show is that once we classify them, so we couldn't analyze the 1,000 cases, we only analyzed 200 of those because those 200 were comparable. And then we classified, as I mentioned, in terms of applications on one hand, and on the other in terms of the impact reported. Now, again, the impact reported, even that is very difficult. So that's why we have big error bars. That's why we look at the whole. We have, if you see the boxes that have is basically percentiles, 25 percentile, 75 percentile in the median, in the middle. So yes, I mean, definitely you will have a lot of variation, but also you will see that people are dealing with this problem. I mean, the Singaporeans, they have, through their Catapult-like institute, the SIMTEC, Singapore Institute of Manufacturing Technologies, they have selected 25 applications and they're applying them across. So they have a more systematic way to measure it because they have looked at the application, they measure it at a contained environment, they measure it with some pilot companies, and that's it, and they put it in the box. This application is expected to increase 25% on this kind of operation. Machining, for example. Machining will the predictive maintenance will improve by this type of parameters. So then you can start checking with the companies. So it is comparable in these cases. They will have the Koreans as well. Basically, you will have auditors. Basically, they're people from Samsung that came to help, and again, some regional technology centers, and they have a systematic way to measure because it's the same people, same auditors, well, two companies. So yeah, there are many issues with data. I agree with you. I was also working a lot on automation before, and it's very difficult to measure and to report to clients. But you will see certain trends. You will see surprisingly similar results and similar operations in certain countries. Many companies, if you deconstruct the manufacturing, we're talking about basic core manufacturing process, and you'll see, again, very surprisingly interesting. I mean, even the results that you mentioned, around 55%, 65%, we saw very similar cases that I can show you a case that achieved similar things in Korea.
It seemed like the end result, the tables and charts, there actually was a rich set of possible applications that you feel are ready to be handed across, used as starting points for workshops and discussions with SMEs, as well as driving actual solutions. You know, it was the end result for me was these are very interesting and useful. So.
Oh yeah, no, and we went to present to Manchester to your colleagues and say, look, these ones are the ones that are getting more results. We might study this, you know. So I did meet Donna and Alain, and I presented this, and basically, yeah, we already know which ones are being more popular and which one are more impactful. So yeah, that's why my last conclusion is there's a lot to learn from international experience because these guys have been doing it for a few years.
So I've been gently sensing in the background there's a kitchen here and the drinks are being prepared. So I think maybe just one more question, if that's okay, from this lady here.
Yeah, it's a follow-up question, so I don't know if that's valid for a last question.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm Abby from the manufacturing team at Knowledge Transfer Network. We're really interested in measuring the impact of digital technology, so that's really fascinating. I just wonder if you feel that there is a bias towards reporting positive case studies, and if you feel that's really reflected in your results, if there's instances of digital technologies being applied and it has negative consequences for businesses, and if they're perhaps not reported as often.
Did you want to start with that one, Carlos?
No, I mean, the answer is yes, there's bias because in any government intervention, again, these are a selection of companies that were interested enough in engaging in a program like the one that I'm doing in Manchester in the group. So you already have a bias, and that's the issue with which I mentioned in terms of evaluation, because then you take a sample and then you have a control group. So there's a selection, and also I suppose you work with caterpillars who is very keen and they find the right place to go, which is obviously the Institute for Manufacturing, and that's why they're doing that. So you have a self-selection bias, but it is. I mean, we visited these places, you know. We visited many companies. We visited the facilities in Singapore, in Korea, in Japan. And yes, I mean, there are some failures. But what is interesting about digital manufacturing is not like previous waves of hype, are that it's very transversal and it's very applicable to small and large companies. So I mean, that's why perhaps you'll see that is more likely to get benefits because they have been tested, because there's a lot of inefficiencies in certain processes like maintenance. So maintenance is a huge thing because we can improve predictive maintenance and get a lot of value. We know that. And also we know that we can improve the visualization for production management decisions. We know that, I mean, we can just go to companies. So if you can get a delta, the value of that change, it might be different in different companies, as was mentioned before, but yeah, it's still an improvement.
Veronica, you want to add something at this point?
Yeah, thank you. I think that from my perspective that I am dealing with companies, I would like to be as positive as Carlos. What I have seen is more failures than good cases. So for this reason, we put it like the best case because I have seen too many failures. And let me just tell you something that I didn't want to say in the presentation. But when we were doing this prototyping Caterpillar, I am doing it in Peterborough. So if you are about, contact Caroline and contact Andy, because if you want to learn from them. We were developing this prototype, and in the way we were in the middle of the project, and then they have a call from Caterpillar headquarters in Chicago. And they say, why are you doing this? if we have already done it and doesn't work, I say, well, we didn't know that it didn't work for you. And this is the response from Caroline and Andrew. And they say, well, we did it. We hired 2 different consultants and we put them to complete. And there was not a benefit in terms of production efficiency or in terms of reduction of cost. And they said, well, we are just trying to evaluate. Now we are moving to the simulation. And so far, the first part of the pilot has run. They said, well, we will be very interesting to see. So I think that even though that they have implemented in the same company, in the same corporation, there are failures. Doesn't mean that because one part of your company has done it well or unwell, another part of your company is going to either succeed or not. What we observe with this is that it is very much to the implementation and the involvement of people in that, what it is boiled down. You have to involve the people and you have to carry them around. And even we have to carry the managing director of the company. And as a result of this, we are trying to replicate the same. But unfortunately, I am less optimistic as Carlos. I have seen more failures than, and it has been to different type of factors. And some of the barriers are what Carlos described. Generally, manager director, they say, no, we are not going to invest. People say, no, the technology looks scary, even blockchain looks very scary. And many other factors.
So we have an optimist and a pessimist. Nicky, your view?
Yeah, Nicky, you're in the middle.
You know, I'm sitting in the middle, so I have to say that it's quite critical to bring the people along in any digital transformation a business will be doing. I mean, that's sort of our experience, let's say, from working with companies along. Sometimes you get the MD or the head, the management, very keen to transform, but the people don't follow. Sometimes you get the people very keen to improve their lives, and the management cannot see the value because they want an immediate value out of the transformation. And you know, the companies that actually can sit together and discuss what they need to be doing, can transform, let's say, together, both management and people, I think normally they're doing well. But also you need to be realistic. These projects is a journey. If you expect an immediate return, you know, I did it and I transformed my whole business and I dominated the world, it's not going to happen. It's a journey, you need to allow the time for the change to happen. So I think if you are realistic about your expectations and you work as a team, both management and technical staff, I think you have more chances at least of succeeding.
Okay, can I suggest then that we take this outside as we take it out there to continue the discussion over a drink and a few snacks. But could you please join me in thanking Carlos, Nicky and Veronica and Sensor City for hosting us tonight. Thank you all very much.